privately first because we have no idea who's going to show up and kick me out from getting in.
you know.
Let's see. So how do I get this YouTube link here? Edit basic info. No. Links. Here we go. Got it. All right.
I never did this whole hangout thing. He's always messing things up with me.
Yeah, same here.
Especially when I try to do it through the phone.
Oh, the phone's the worst. I can never get through.
Yeah. And you would think something like Google would be able to do something proper, man.
Well, we thought they could, and then they decided to ban cryptocurrency ads on Google. Did you see that?
Yeah, well, it's it's just ads. I actually see that as a good thing, to be honest.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, if you think about it, imagine how much scam we've had on this market this past couple of months.
That's true.
It's not like everything about crypto is banned on Google completely. It's just everything that's connected to advertising. So people won't be able to, push their crypto with the help of, ICO money and shit like that. So now we're gonna see a situation where actually, when you have projects that actually have some value, actually have some dedicated followers that will push the, how to say, organic levels on Google. And to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I would like them to be more targeted in the advertisements that they would allow. And I also think that same idea could kind of translate into how the SEC treats ICOs and security or as securities, and where that specific ICOs apply to the SEC to kind of clear their name that they're not a scam, that they do have a working product. So therefore, there's a little more consumer protection, and it goes through kind of a regulatory body. And I think that's kind of the future here, is that we do. What's that?
At the end of the day, we got to consider the fact that crypto is a big threat to Google. So this is a good opportunity for them to, blame it on others while they still put in their bans in every single way they can. Because if crypto does get big, I mean, Google could be in trouble.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because certain blockchains could come along and kind of be an even better Google search algorithm and more and function as what Google has been trying to do, which is
exactly. You already have those projects. What is it called? Give me a second. I think it's Neptus or something that's trying to do the same thing as Google, but in crypto. What is it called? Nebulous. NAS.
really. I'm going to share my screen, so I'll start searching stuff and people can watch instead of a blank screen. I think this is the right screen I'm sharing. Is it? Yeah. All right. So nebulous.
And nebulous, yeah. Nebulas.
Nebulous.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I don't think where's this one listed on markets?
I'm not sure actually. It's not that big yet.
That's interesting. It's on Huobi, OK Exchange, Gate. I've never even heard of Gate.
Yeah, it's not that popular. Yes.
Cool. So is this something that is this like one of the coins that you believe in for kind of?
Nah, that would be a bit too much. There's not many coins I believe in, to be honest. But well, it is interesting. I like the idea and the fact that they're trying to achieve something like Google, but at the same time, for me, it's like there's so many projects screaming like, "Oh, we're gonna take over the world," whilst they have nothing to back it up with. So it's like, yeah, sure. I mean, sounds good. Let's see what you come up with. So in many cases, I want to see what they actually do before I even start to consider them as a viable option.
Gotcha.
And nevertheless, I mean, the vision is interesting. The fact that they want to do it through blockchain, if I'm not mistaken, to me sounds faulty to begin with, but who knows? There's a lot of, I mean, I guess most of you know how many projects we've seen pop up this past year. So it's so many projects I haven't had time to even go through yet. So Nebulous was on my watch list.
Okay. So what kind of things are you looking for right now? Like, are you looking for infrastructure? Are you looking for apps? Are you like, what's your biggest interest here in this entire space? Like, what is something that you hear about or you want to follow closely that you're just like, I can't stop reading about this. I want to know more. What is that to you?
Well, easy question, eh?
Yeah.
Mm, well, actually, to be honest, the projects that I went through my portfolio the other day, and I noticed that the projects that I'm heavily invested in, or more than others, are platform projects. I kind of like the idea of investing in something that will be the building blocks of the whichever one that makes it. Because at the end of the day, one of them will be the popular one, whether it's Ethereum or Neo or Waves or Hardware or whatever.
Hmm.
The one that actually, how to say, picks up properly. And I'm not that sure it's going to be Ethereum or Bitcoin. So whichever actually gets a lot of attention will, in my opinion, blow up massively. And so I try to diversify most of my positions between those. And to me, that's a more secure investment as well, because it takes a lot more for those to go down than just project that niches itself into one specific thing, so to say, because it's so many projects are going to come up every day, and it's going to be impossible to tell which one is the one or which one is, you know, just another coin that's going to disappear in a couple of months.
Yeah, it's
Binance
crazy.
coin is a good example. I've been decentralized exchanges have been also a sector I've been really interested in. BitShares, you have Airswap, Kyber Network, you have what is ZeroX. You have so many projects that are popping up within the decentralized exchanges field, which I think is going to be very, very important for cryptocurrencies to actually survive. They need to have a DEX in order to survive. Otherwise, we're going to see decentralized institutions take over and just manipulate the shit out of the markets and basically turn it into the same thing we already have, which kind of takes away the whole point of crypto.
Right.
And we will see situations like you have right now where everything just gets flushed out because people don't see the reason of holding these coins. What are you going to hold them for if you don't use them?
Yeah, it's a great point. I was talking to my brother who works for IBM, and he is trying to get more and more involved in the blockchain sector that IBM's trying to innovate with and sell products to other companies that are on the blockchain. And we were talking about what the future of these sales products are, because right now, I mean, why would any company care about proof of work and having a coin behind them? You know, they don't really give a shit about that kind of stuff. What they really want is something that manages their inventory or something that is a true blockchain protocol that gives transparency and gives early warning signals and whatever that may be. But they don't care if it's backed by a coin. So what do all these things that are backed by coins, what I mean, I know there are certain instances where they are useful, but I think the majority of these blockchain products, I mean, people aren't going to have a way of investing in them. The ones that are truly innovative and the ones that truly do help these companies out, they're not going to be something that the public is going to be investing in through ICOs and raising money. I think that that's kind of the industry future for these products, and it's kind of different. It's a lot different than what we're thinking about with it right now, because now the whole idea of ICOs is to raise money for these companies to start to develop their projects. But really, it's not for the companies. It's like these individual guys who arguably may or may not have enough money to do this stuff. And once they get that private funding, then they actually start the innovation. But what we're seeing now in the space is that so many of these guys that are starting this innovation, they're either not doing it all the way, they're running away with the money, the product that they come up with is a piece of trash. And I think it's tarnishing this entire sector because of that. And it's also
I mean, the biggest problem here is they're getting the attention of regulators because of the scams and because they're not delivering products. And regulators are like, well, we're going to have to do something about this. And that's what kills innovation, because, you know, on top of the bad actors that aren't delivering real products, then you bring in the threat of regulation that could even further stifle innovation. That's kind of the scary part. But what do you think about kind of these enterprise level development of softwares on blockchain, or development of blockchain, and not necessarily needing a proof of work or a coin backed blockchain that, you know, really companies don't care about? Do you think that that's kind of the direction that a lot of this can go in, where all these blockchains, they just, you know, don't need to be backed by something that's funded by the public that, you know, invests in their coin? I mean, why do they need that?
Well, I partly agree with what you said in the beginning there, as in regards to the whole case of, are the coins actually needed? In majority of the projects right now, I actually don't see the use case of most of the coins, but at the same time, we are going to see a lot of utility tokens pop up that actually are needed, and many forget what the proof of work actually is there for. I mean, why do we have proof of work? Because the let's take the example of what you said with IBM and the Hyperledger and so forth. When you have corporations that are already centralized, who do not seek a decentralized structure, in that scenario, I agree. Why would they need to have proof of work? Because as long as, you know, they have something they can rely on, whether it comes to legal backup, whether it comes to financial security or whatever, they could structure a certain project the way where they actually get the security they need, and they don't need to have any proof of work or anything, and they can skip all that, you know, we're not going to destroy the nature and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, then you give up the decentralization. And at that point, you know, what's the difference between what we already have? A centralized server and a blockchain is not that different. You can keep a perfectly well-managed ledger on top of a centralized server as well. Why would you go on top of blockchain? Just because you put the word blockchain before the whatever project you have might boost your business a bit, but at the end of the day, if you're not clear with what proof of work is there for, then yeah, I could agree with you. But at the whole intention of crypto and proof of work, and I see people dropping out. Is it that boring already? And but when it comes to decentralization, then proof of work is needed with the current blockchain structure that we have. I don't think it's going to be needed for long, because we're going to have alternatives popping up, and we're going to have alternatives where we don't need to, have a consensus where such big amount of resources are required to keep a decentralized ledger. And a lot of those have popped up already. You have, what was it recently? I had a look at Hashgraph. That one has a type of gossip protocol that keeps the consensus mechanism outside of the whole proof of work mechanism, which actually I can see work pretty well. They chose to go the centralized way because they are more corporate minded, and in some sense that's smarter because they can make more money that way, but they are giving up the decentralized part. So I don't see it being successful long term. They don't use anything unique. They just take the gossip protocol, and then they created this hash graph that they of course going to patent as much as they can to begin with, but it's nothing as a proprietary about it that others can't use. I actually know a couple of projects that already used that kind of gossip protocol since years back. They just haven't, taunted about it and went public about it because it's not being used at the moment. Hashgraph chose to, market themselves like, oh, we're going to be the blockchain killer and this, and that. But they're going to be just as centralized as other projects like IBM and stuff. So I don't see them as viable competitor unless they do something drastic with their centralization model, or they open source everything, or I'm not exactly sure what the plan is.
Mm-hmm.
But it is an interesting protocol.
What do you think about the whole debate right now about the energy usage that goes into cryptocurrencies and how that affects what will inevitably become the biggest point of debate for this entire sector and for this new technology? Is that it just takes up so much electricity to mine Bitcoin that it almost seems to me that any kind of protocol that's not going to be proof of work, where you don't need these miners every 30 seconds, or not 30 seconds, but hang on a second. I'm getting a phone call coming through my computer. Sorry about that.
San, you can feel free to jump in as well. Eh? It's not that many in here.
Hello.
But let's see what's going on.
Sure. So I'm also cooking dinner, so that's why I didn't jump in before. So I think this whole notion and this argument of energy cost, it's kind of a misnomer. I think that it's okay if you have like a very decentralized, useful network, which can say something about truth and about stating facts on a timeline. I think it's okay that it will cost society some energy, and that's one point. I mean, obviously, I think it would be better if we had like one such protocol running, and not like 10 different types, which do sort of less the same. And then even if it costs a lot of energy, I mean, we're going to an era where we have like limitless energy. At some point, we will have either enough solar power, or if the guys, I think, what was it, Boston University? I'm not quite sure, but if they can crack the code to nuclear fusion, and they have some very ambitious goals, like within 15 years, there should be some kind of a type of fusion reactor. I mean, why are we still talking about energy in that case? I think it's already solved. So I think maybe now at this moment it's kind of a nice headline for articles, but I think at some point this question becomes irrelevant, or this line of thought becomes irrelevant. So
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for jumping in. Sorry about before. I've got a cleaning lady coming. But anyway, anyone's welcome to jump in. I realize that it seems only, 8 or 9 people can join the Hangout. And I am monitoring YouTube, so if anyone has any questions, we're happy to go through anything. But with that
that's why. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, that's cool. So you were saying, San, you were just saying about people trying to at least get onto renewable energy sources, and even in a time where we may have infinite access to energy, obviously this isn't going to be any kind of worry. But right now, this is like the biggest concern, is how do we not spend so much energy on doing this? And that's really what the case is here. And of course, if we can solve nuclear fusion, then it's going to be a totally different situation. But the one thing that is most interesting, and probably the most realistic, in my opinion, is that of solar. And we've done so much in terms of improving the efficiency of solar energy, but it's just not quite there yet. And a couple of my family members have been looking into building out a ton of solar panels and just sticking them on the tops of their warehouses, and therefore being able to harness solar, but also, yeah, there you go, someone's saying solar city, but also installing wind turbines. But I still think the calculation came out that you would have to put in such an incredible amount of investment into setting this thing up that it would take almost 10 years into the future until you start seeing a return on your investment. So, I mean, at least from what I see, it's not quite there yet. And obviously, if some other source comes along, it changes the game.
I think about solar energy, it really depends on where you live in the world. Oh, that's my cooking is done. But it really depends, because I think also, I mean, at least in parts of Europe, there's like subsidies as well. But there's some kind of great video about having solar, or like parity, where energy from solar energy is as cheap as conventional energy sources. And there are some great documentaries about it, and we're really closing that gap. It will be maybe in a few years or whatever, but it won't take a lot of time anymore, where you will see that solar energy is actually cheaper to build and maintain than like conventional sources. So I know, for example, in already like in the Middle Eastern countries, it's already cheaper to do solar than to do any other form of energy. So
cool.
I mean, as you can say, I think we are pretty much at early stages at the moment, especially when it comes to. I mean, people seem to think that how to say, the mining algorithm and everything that we have on Bitcoin and other similar projects is going to stay the same forever. But it's not going to be sustainable to keep it like this for that much longer. So we're going to see a lot of improvements pop up as well. It's going to be, in my opinion, we're going to have a lot of more fork dramas coming up, especially when it comes to Bitcoin's mining algorithm. It can't keep having that one single type of algorithm. And as that happens, we're going to see a lot of different options. And we saw, what was it, last year? We saw Samsung and some other companies getting into the mining industry as well, and starting to produce, how to say, more efficient chips and everything. So we're going to see the whole space change a lot as well. So for people to use that as an argument, like, oh, what we have now is never going to last and Bitcoin can't survive, to me sounds a bit, how to say, naive.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because people seem to forget that there are developers that have access to changing the code, the underlying code for Bitcoin. So it's not something like I mean, look, you can argue that the same parallels can be made to social media, where the first social media platforms were like MySpace or things like that. And then it wasn't until Facebook entered the space and totally revolutionized everything. I mean, MySpace, it's not like the guys didn't have access to the code and couldn't change the website, kind of in the same way that the Bitcoin core developers, they also have access to the code and they can all change it. But the problem is getting consensus and getting the miners to adopt that. And it's hard, right? So what really happens when it comes to innovation in a space like this is that something better just comes along and it's there already, and Bitcoin has to keep up with that. And in this case, whether that's changing the algorithm in which the mining occurs, which in my opinion is going to be very complicated to do to increase energy. Go ahead.
On that point, does it really have to keep up with the other technologies as well? I mean, it is doing what it is supposed to do pretty well. I mean, to keep a public ledger and have a store of value, it isn't that, how to say, terrible as a lot of people say. Of course, we can have this argument about transaction cost, this, and that, but as time goes by, that's going to disappear as well.
Well,
proper structure on the Lightning Network, of course, it's going to be centralized to a certain degree, but it's going to reach a pretty decentralized level as well. And then all that thought around it about transaction costs and stuff like that will disappear. And when we get to that point, I could actually see Bitcoin survive the way it is, in the sense of we're still, okay, just to be clear, when I say the way it is, Bitcoin has had hard forks basically every year ever since inception. It has had a lot of hard forks that people are just not aware of because it's not such a big deal. It wasn't until last year that hard forks suddenly became such a big deal, because a lot of people wanted to go another way and gain control in certain ways and so forth, that it suddenly turned into this whole hard fork drama. Otherwise, we had hard forks more or less every year, a couple of them actually.
Hey, Peyman, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So Bitcoin works with electricity, right? So you can produce Bitcoins by using electricity. And everybody's like trying to come out with a solution that's going to cost less. But the value behind Bitcoin is coming from the electricity cost, right? So what do you think about that one? So if they come out with like a coin that's going to cost less, then the value behind it going to be less too, though, right?
Well, think of it like this. What is the most important thing? I mean, the most important thing, the way I see it, is to have a robust and secure protocol. And Bitcoin has a limited amount. I mean, it's, a lot of people compare it to gold, fine. But gold, we don't know what the amount is. We don't know when it ends, when it finishes. Bitcoin, we know, 21 million, that's it. So at the end of the day, Bitcoin is limited. So if it turns out to be a big thing, I'm not saying it will, but if it turns out to be a big thing, the price could go to levels where the cost of production will be a fraction of it, no matter how much electricity we use. So that whole cost of electricity and stuff like that might not be that significant until we reach an insane amount of power consumption, which to me sounds not that convincing, since I'm not that big of a BTC fan, as in long term. I mean, plus 10 years or so forth. I think we're going to see projects that are going to take over, and Bitcoin will stay the way it is as a store of value. It might actually have a lot of value as well, but to be used on a mass scale, I have difficulty seeing that.
Interesting. So you think Bitcoin is kind of it's going to become a commodity essentially, if it hasn't already?
In a way, yeah, because I see that more probable than all these upgrades. They're going to turn Bitcoin into the ultimate thing, which everything can run on top of. I just don't see the convenience in that, and why people would do that when better tech will pop up. So, but that's just personal opinion. I could be way off on that one, but I don't invest in Bitcoin long term, as in, oh, that's going to be the ultimate coin. I'm more pro cryptocurrency and the shift of, you can call it a paradigm shift, but when we turn more into a more decentralized structure, we're going to see the development of technology go a lot faster. And I don't see why we need to be restricted to just Bitcoin. Bitcoin was a very good first step, absolutely, and it might always be there, but I don't see why we should all get so religious about it.
I think that's a great point. And I think that's what a lot of people in this space make the biggest mistake of doing, and especially newcomers and, the idiot news media. They're clearly clueless about this. And that's what drives the public into a lot of this misinformation, is that, just because Bitcoin was the first.
I mean, one thing that people should keep in mind as well, I mean, the whole thing about crypto started with kind of a crypto anarchy movement and stuff like that. So the whole intention of crypto kind of goes against most things that we have in our society at the moment. And why would the media support it? I mean, why would the companies around us support it? So if we keep that in the back of our minds, that maybe it isn't the best thing according to most people, then it does make sense the way they're presenting it. I mean, I'm not that surprised to see why they're attacking in so many, how to say, different ways that don't make any sense. But a lot of people don't feel like it's worth the trouble to actually read about it themselves and learn why or how things work, because media is always right.
Well, that's just the biggest problem when it comes to the public, is that, we're all, I mean, not even just the public, but human nature in general is, most people are going to be lazy when it comes to informing themselves about new technologies. I mean, think about our parents. When computers came out, they defaulted to us to figure out how to, install a mouse, which, for us, it's like you just plug the thing in and it works. Well, that's all they cared about.
And I think that's a very good point, because that also shows that it doesn't really matter if people are lazy or not, in my opinion. I mean, those who are not lazy, those who choose to actually put some effort into it now and get into it and in early stages, they will be rewarded later. And those who choose to be lazy and just listen to whatever others say, they will maybe make money, maybe lose money, but at the end of the day, they will choose whatever is presented to them which in my opinion, sooner or later is going to be crypto anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the argument that just, I mean, it's not even an argument. It's just as people get older, they just have less and less ability to assimilate new information and to even apply and want to use new technologies. Because as you get older, you just get kind of comfortable with your lifestyle. And when something new comes in and changes it, it threatens that whole idea. And that's kind of what cryptocurrency is here.
I don't agree completely with that, but I could agree that they get less and less interested. I don't think they lose any ability in adapting themselves, but sure, I could.
They're slower, right? Like, think about your parents' generation and
I
how
don't know,
long.
have you met Richard? He's online sometime. He's in New Zealand, so
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's definitely exceptions to that. I mean, I think that if you put hard rules on anything, you're going to get yourself in trouble. But I'm just saying, generally speaking, I think people that are 45 to 50 and older, they most have trouble or are just not willing to undertake the necessary journey it is to adopt new information and new technologies.
Yeah, I could agree on that. People tend to be lazy in the beginning.
Yeah, and I mean, even I mean, you know, the generation that's millennial generation, a lot of this generation grew up with technology, but it's an interesting dichotomy because on one side you have people that understand the technology, understand how to code, know how to, you know, properly implement this technology, make it interoperable between different platforms, whatever. But then on the other hand, you have the generation that's just like, well, I know how to download apps from the App Store, and I know how to turn on a computer and surf the internet, but and use Instagram and Facebook and, you know, Snapchat. And it's such a stark dichotomy between those two different.
And also keep in mind that this whole development that we have, it isn't how to say, in my opinion, it's going to expand exponentially. It's not restricted to, you know, the next generation being able to program and this and that. We are already moving into AI programming for us. Soon we don't even have to program anymore. We just instruct the AI what we want, and they program it for us. And this is nothing that we are looking into the future to do. It's happening right now. AI is programming for us in many sectors. So we're going to enter a type of structure where architects will be more wanted than actual programmers. I mean, programmers right now, everyone thinks that programming is the profession to be in because you're going to have such a big demand of jobs, this and that. But just like any other job that is in some sense getting once in a while kind of say obsolete, the same thing could happen to a lot of programmers as we move into the AI field. So it's difficult to, how to say, predict, which I really don't like to do, and actually don't even like the word. But I do think that it is good to be on top of things and not just drop it just because the market is going one way, this or that. I mean, if you know what you actually believe in and want to support, no matter what it is, if you put some time and effort into it, I think you will be rewarded.
Totally. It's just, I guess, to bring my point home is that millennials specifically, I mean, my generation, I don't know if everyone here is a millennial. I'm sure we have lots of different generations that tune into this broadcast, but at least I don't speak for all millennials, of course. So at least from what I'm seeing in my age range, which is, I guess, the 26 to 35 range, if you want to call it that, the attention span of this generation is incredibly short. And I think that has to do with the product of technology and instant gratification. When you get a text message, it's like, you know, it gives you this dopamine release. Like someone likes you. If someone likes one of your Instagram posts, it's that instant dopamine release, and you post back on or like back their Instagram picture. And I think that the same kind of mentality has translated into markets now. As the millennial generation gets older, and we have more money and we're more, or discretionary income, whatever you want to call it, that now millennials have always been sort of hesitant to invest in markets. And then crypto comes around and says, hey, this is totally different than what you're used to. It stands against big banks and it'll prevent things like the 2008 collapse from happening. Everyone's like, hell yeah, I'm on board for that. And people started throwing their money at this market. And I think that's another reason why we saw such an explosion in this space, is that people were dying for something new to throw their money at. And it was instant gratification. You bought Bitcoin, you bought Litecoin, you bought Ethereum, you bought any of these coins in November, December, and even in January, and you were still making money instantaneously. And it was like, that's what we love. Like, oh yeah, I bought this yesterday, I'm already up 20%. I can tell everyone how smart I was. And now it's totally different. You know, for the last month, we're just on this steady decline. And my friends used to talk to me about crypto nonstop. I was invited over for dinner parties. People always wanted to hang out with me. They're just like, tell us what's going to happen. Is it still going up? And I told them what they didn't want to hear, is that, no, you need to not be buying here. Nobody listened. And now, I mean, I just saw a couple friends last night that I hadn't seen in a month, and they didn't even want to talk about crypto. I was like, so how are you guys doing with the crypto? And they're like, well, I just caution I would caution people. You know, anyone that's here that's thinking about getting into it, just, you know, it's a risky asset. Don't get into it. And it's amazing. Like they've changed their mentality so quickly because of what's happened in the market here.
Yeah, no, I totally feel you on that one. And in my opinion, I would say better off not investing until when we get to a point where crypto can be used, or we actually use it in everyday life, then I would be somewhat willing to recommend to people here and there. But until then, I don't see the point, because we're going to have these swings up and down all the way till we reach that point where people actually use the crypto. And then they can't dump it like they do now, as we see like in the chart you have in front of you, because they're being, you know, taken off the exchanges, taken off the decentralized exchanges, taken off the market, and actually being used in everyday life. And that's what we want to see. That's the whole idea of it, as far as I'm concerned. So until then, when people ask me about it, I'm like, I mean, look into it, read about it. But as an investment, I don't see the point.
Yeah.
Unless you're a trader.
The other problem is that none of them did any research, at least in my friend group. I mean, they would do a little bit of reading. Some treated it like investing in stocks, where they would look into the owner or the lead developer and then the core team that was developing the coin. But the underlying technology is just so far over some people's heads, and especially in my friends group, that they're just like, well, we didn't really know what the hell they were talking about. And, you know, they're talking about decentralized exchanges, just like, I don't really understand that. And I think it's a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp who haven't been in the space for a while, to understand that, you know, Bitcoin is kind of it's the epitome of a decentralized currency. And people don't get that because they think the dollar is decentralized. They think that, you know, currencies that you and I spend day to day are decentralized. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's actually not even close to what you're thinking.
And another question is, how much do they care? That's another thing as well. I don't want to judge everyone to think, you know, in one generalized thought, but a lot of people don't really care that much either. I mean, they're fine with the current way we have it, and the biggest interest for them is basically quick and easy money. That's what I see with a lot of friends that I try to one, stay away from, and one, not give any advice in crypto about, because they usually get burned, because the only thing they're after is just have a quick profit, quick gains, so they can move on and buy that car they always wanted, the house they always wanted, or whatever. You know, gives them that dopamine rush, as you say.
Yeah.
So when you have that kind of mentality where you get so lazy and the only thing you look for is for someone else to create value for you, it is kind of a vicious circle where you...
Totally.
Yeah, I don't really see how crypto would save you from that, unless you kind of change your whole way of thought and mentality towards things around you, not just crypto.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I
even
think
if you invest in stocks and stuff like that, like you mentioned, if you actually put the time and effort into it and uh, look it up properly, do your FA, do your TA and everything, it's not that difficult. But most people do lose money on it because they're simply too lazy to actually put the effort into it. And that's basically what Brian is saying a lot of the times as well, and why people might experience the three-way a little bit slower than other places, because it takes time and you actually have to do something about it, rather than join a group that tells you what to do here and there. You can't imagine how many PMs I get like, oh, so what do you think about this coin? What do you think about that coin? I'm like, dude, I have no idea.
yeah, people do not want to do their own research, and it's frustrating. But the other thing about all of this is that we have to remember that what we're talking about right here with our friends and the public is that they're just that. They're the retail public, and they're not the ones that control the price. You have to remind yourself of that. The ones that control the price are the institutions, and arguably even more so, the ones that control the price are the ones with the real innovative product. The guys that come out with something that you're like, holy shit, I want to use this day to day. Like, I see this as something I need. And right now, what you've been saying is basically that there really isn't a single currency that you're just like need in your everyday life. And I think that's what a lot of these developers are struggling with and or trying to get mainstream, is getting one of these coins, getting one of these blockchains, getting one of these products ready so that you can't function just like you can't function without your cell phone every day. I mean, when I leave without my phone, I don't know what the hell's going on in my life. Just like if you were to leave without your wallet for whatever coin it is, or maybe it's, you don't have the module for your car that relies on the blockchain in order to get you from A to B. I mean, there's just so many different aspects in which blockchain can be used that it's just we're not there yet for it to kind of enter into everyday life. But once that does, I mean, these companies are already far ahead of the game, and they kind of have their own vision as to how that's going to unfold and what that product's going to be. The question's going to be for people like us, who arguably, anyone who's listening to us right now, we're almost the smart money. We're not the dumb money. We're not, the institutions, but we're certainly not willing to jump in at any time. So we're here because we like investing, we like trading, we like technical analysis, but this kind of, Peyman's here because we're bridging the fundamentals with the technicals. And I think that's such an important thing because, it's great that you can buy 88.6s and you can buy the Kavarkinator and all those setups. But what could happen is you get something like a delisting event on Bittrex on a coin like, whatever it is, Club or CPC. And you're like, oh, I'm going to buy 88.6. And then the floor just drops out from underneath it. I mean, you can't really help yourself there. I mean, look at this thing. This went almost back down to the initial low, and now it's trying to get back up again. But I don't even know any fundamentals about this coin. So I'm just as guilty as the next person for buying something that I don't understand fundamentally. But that's because we're so early in this space that everyone's like, hey, I can buy anything and make money on it. But now we're seeing that change. So I think it's important that we do also have a fundamental aspect to all of these names, in addition to being able to do the technical analysis. And that's not to say that just doing technical analysis on its own won't work. I think it works great, but you're not going to get 100% success rate in anything, and no matter what you do. But the more information and the more that you combine all of the stuff that you gather, the higher your likelihood of success is. And it takes a lot for you and a lot of energy to kind of not only do the technical analysis, learn how to do the technical analysis, but then go and be like, hey, what the hell is Capri coin? What does it even do? Do you know, Peyman?
No, I don't. And I do agree with what you say there. And one thing that I think is also important to point out is to set up a plan and follow the plan, like Brian says. At the end of the day, if your plan is to go with mostly TA, then do it. I mean, of course, you're going to have a lot of coins that get delisted here and there, and you can have a lot of stuff that you have no idea about is a piece of crap and then suddenly they pull the rug under your feet, then you're gonna get those surprises. But if those risks are already calculated in your plan, you basically have like, okay, 10% could disappear in this and that, then I don't see any reason why you would feel any anxiety or stress about it. For me, it doesn't really work out because to me, the FA side is the most important part for myself. So to feel comfortable, I need to be able to, how to say, justify why I'm buying the coin, no matter how juicy the chart is or whatever. So there actually are a lot of coins that I see run up and put up really nice structures here and there, but I just can't buy them because it's not something that I believe will work, or I haven't had the time to look into it. And to me, that works because when we have days like this or months like these past couple of months where everything is just going, I don't know, down the drain, you get bloodbaths every week and this and that, and people giving up and all that stuff. At those times, I feel less stressed because at the end of the day, the projects I'm invested in, I do believe in long term, so it doesn't really make any difference. Of course, it would be nicer to have a bit more fiat or BTC to invest in them and increase your positions. But as long as you take profit on the way up, I don't see the problem. And just like Thomas said earlier, I mean, if you have a structured plan and structured way to approach this market, it isn't that difficult nor, how to say, stressful. But it takes work. It does. Can't argue that.
Yeah, totally. So do we want to go over any fundamentals on specific coins, or
Yeah, sure.
what's if I ask you a coin that you love and like you're just the one that comes to mind first, which one's that?
Well, that's a classical question, but for me, it's really difficult to say because, I mean, one coin could be really good in some ways and another coin could be really good in other ways. They could complement each other. And like we mentioned earlier, I mean, at the moment, I'm pretty interested in decentralized exchanges. I'm pretty interested in platforms like Ethereum, EOS, Neo, ADA, whatever. I'm pretty interested in anonymous coins because that's going to be a very important part of our crypto culture, whatever you want to call it. Right now, thus far, I don't see any coin that actually is anonymous 100%. So we haven't really got to that point yet. And I think the coin that actually manages to achieve full privacy, anonymity will blow up like crazy. When that happens, I have no idea. I have a couple of ideas that could work, but thus far, the best option we have is Monero. And I think that's why people are buying Monero, even though the tech is not that good. And even in days like this, when you have everything basically go back to the all-time lows, I mean, if you look at Monero, it's actually not that terrible. For those people who bought early, Monero is still holding up pretty strong.
Yeah, it's not even at the 50% retracement level from November, which is way better than most of these coins can say for themselves.
Yeah, and to me that's really surprising because, in my opinion, Monero is a piece of crap.
I'm guessing you didn't do the fork for Monero Private or whatever they called it.
Any sense at all to me, and when I read about the whole drama around it, it wasn't that surprising, to be honest. It's just the whole forking culture that has rise from last year's forks is a little bit ridiculous in my opinion, and it's just another money grab scheme in my opinion. There's no reason why you would go on with 99% of the forks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue with this Monero fork was that the fork coin wanted your private key for your real Monero wallet.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I didn't. One more time, they could what?
So Monero, the hard fork was what? It's called Monero Private, right? or Monero Stealth, I forget. But either way, the hard fork for Monero, in order to get the airdropped coins, you needed to give the new fork coins your private wallet address.
But the thing with this fork as well was it was never supported by Monero. I mean, my Monero never supported this fork. I don't know exactly where it came from. I don't really understand. It's kind of like the Litecoin fork. Suddenly people just got into their head that, you know, we're going to fork this thing. I don't know exactly who was behind it. And I don't know the actual reason behind it. That's kind of why I stayed away from it and didn't even bother looking in deeply into it. But it sounds really strange to me that you actually have to give your private keys in order to get the fork.
Yeah, which, I mean,
If
anyone with
a fork, you should be able to just have it in your wallet and basically have a split chain option, which should be supported by the Monero team. If it's not supported by the main developers or the foundation or the core devs, I don't see any reason why you would risk your money for that. Unless you try with a small amount and quickly move your money to exchange and, how to say, move them around and go back into Monero just to make sure that they can't be taken away from you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, I love that you make the case about anonymous coins, because I think that right now, and even historically speaking, most importantly, is that cash has always functioned as that anonymity aspect for people who, you know, for whatever reason, don't want certain people to be aware of what they're purchasing.
That's going to be taken away from them soon as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that governments around the planet are all trying to move away from using cash. I mean, I know that India is trying really hard to get rid of it. The European Union, probably since the 90s, has been moving toward a cashless society.
I mean, I live in Sweden, and if I pay something with cash, people look at me like I'm a criminal or something.
Yeah, which is crazy, right? I mean, it's
you can. I mean, you can buy chewing gum for a couple of cents with a credit card, and that makes more sense than actually paying with cash.
Yeah.
So we reached the point where cash is no longer people. Sometimes when you're gonna, let's say you have you're gonna buy something off of Craigslist. Okay, we don't have Craigslist, but corresponding version of Craigslist. Imagine you're gonna buy something off of Craigslist. A lot of people don't even accept cash. Like, I can't use cash anyway, so why would I use that? You need to. We have something called Swish instead, and Swish is kind of like the instant money transfer between banks. So they came themselves up with something that's pretty similar to blockchain tech, but it's just a ledger between, kind of like Ripple, a ledger between the banks where you could transfer money instantaneously. So people don't need to have cash anymore. They can just Swish each other.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that's needed right now is an ability for individuals to do this kind of transaction between each other, because that was supposed to be Bitcoin, but or even any number of these coins, and it's not caught on mainstream to the point where
the main reason why Bitcoin is being accepted and blockchain tech is being accepted by institutions and governments and so forth is that they're starting to realize that Bitcoin is actually more transparent than the option they had before. Bitcoin makes it more difficult to be anonymous than it was before. So it is actually to their advantage to implement blockchain tech, because now everything can be tracked.
Yeah, but I think the government specifically want their own blockchain that they've made themselves, that they force everyone to use.
The opportunity to print as much as they want. Bitcoin is restricted, so that takes a little bit of their power.
Right. They want to function as the central bank they've always functioned as, and Bitcoin undermines that if they were to adopt that specific protocol. But like,
I don't see why anyone would use that in the future. At the end of the day, if we get to a point where we actually get a coin that is usable in every important aspect, I don't see why people would use decentralized coins that different governments give out. I mean, sure, they can do, but it's like, do you remember when we had this whole development of what are they called? These mini discs. You got Blu-ray DVDs. You got everything got better and better. But at the end of the day, people stopped caring because we had everything on USB sticks at the end of it. I mean, thing got to a point where no matter how much they improved the different discs, people didn't use them anyway. So they kind of let go of that. And I think we're going to see the same thing with IBM's Hyperledger, this, and that. Even though they managed to do 1 million transactions per second, we will reach a level where we won't have any more limitations. It's going to be infinite amount of transactions per second. And people can't really imagine that, but we're not that far away from it either. So when people say like, oh, which one is the best blockchain? To me, it's like, at the end of the day, it's just blockchain. Pick one. Whichever you find is resonates the most with you right now, go for it. Most of them are going to increase in price anyway. But once we get to the point where blockchain is no longer needed, then all of them are going to be the same.
Totally. Yeah, I would love to see a blockchain where everything is on it, right? Where not only just money transfer, but contracts, but services, kind of like China, where they developed through their WeChat app.
Protocol could have all that, definitely. Blockchain, in my opinion, is faulty by design, so you can't achieve that. But definitely a protocol that could achieve all that in one will make things a lot easier across the board.
They would be like the Amazon of blockchain, essentially, if whatever company came up with that.
You have to be the one either. I mean, if you get a project that could achieve that, then you could also run. Okay, let's put it. Just play with the thought a little bit. Let's say I saw that Bugra wrote about, is it possible to actually have an anonymous coin? My opinion is yes, you can. To go into the details is going to take a little bit too long right now, but we can talk about that another time. But let's say you have privacy at the core. Let's say you have infinite transactions at the core. Let's say you get all those essential things you need at the core levels, not just upgrades on top of upgrades on top of upgrades like we are getting with the blockchain at the moment. If you have a protocol that at its core meets those requirements, then you have scalability, you have privacy, you have all those things you need for this whole platform to function as a building stone for everything else. That's when we're going to see a true use case for crypto and everything around it. And I don't see why people wouldn't use that, because let's say the problem we have with Bitcoin at the moment when it comes to decentralization and how you can have it hacked, you can have the mining, the centralized mining stations compromised and this and that. All that could disappear if Bitcoin is run on top of another protocol. Who says that Bitcoin has to be Bitcoin by itself? Bitcoin can be on top of something else. Imagine, okay, this is not possible right now with Ethereum, but imagine Bitcoin on top of Ethereum, something like that, but not Ethereum, something that could actually handle it. So we could see a synergy between products, between projects, evolve into something that people couldn't even imagine before. And we're not that far away from that. There's a lot of developers who are actually working with those, targets in mind, and they're building the protocols with those type of ambitions. But those projects are usually not that hype because for starters, they don't actually work at the moment. And for second, I mean, people want to put the money into something to have those quick bucks. So if you don't have a coin that you can invest in, it's not that interesting. But if you go into the backdoor forums and talk to developers here and there, a lot of people have a lot of interesting ambitions that I find very interesting, and which also makes me very biased towards the whole crypto scene and extremely bullish, because I have never seen this much progress ever in this past, when was it? I entered this field around 2011. So in this past 7 years, I've never seen this much progress. And that's why I would say for those who actually would like to see crypto succeed and do see some potential in it, I mean, hang in there, be patient, do your thing, follow your plan.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to mention, to see how amazing the innovation has been just from 2011 until now. And I would argue that the biggest innovators have happened in the last year and a half to 2 years. And just to imagine what's happened in just that short time frame, and the more and more talent that you suck out from other places, I think the bigger and better and more successful and the more problems that some of these people will be able to solve. The question is just going to be, how long until we get mass adoption of some of these protocols and some of these ideas? And to me, I don't think it's that far off. I mean, 5 years from now, to me, I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these ideas massively implemented around the planet. I mean, that may seem a little optimistic to most people, but I think that we're like one catastrophe away from just almost hard forking, if you will, the monetary system onto this platform. And I mean, that's what it's going to take, right? For people to adopt something new, you have to show that the old platform and the old system is outdated, it's flawed. Everyone knows that this monetary system is all of those things. The problem is we're just so married to it right now that it's just one catastrophe away from people being like, you know what? I'm done. I don't want this anymore. Let's move on to this new thing. And that's crypto here.
Yeah. I mean, people don't even think about the fact that, I mean, now we are very used to standards like, I have my hardware wallet and I have these exchanges that, are pretty secure and this and that. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We didn't even have access to something like Ledger or Trezor or whatever. People actually had to download the whole blockchain on the computer. It could be gigabytes of, crap on your computer just to have a coin, just to feel a little bit secure. I remember the first time I was going to buy Bitcoin, you had to download like 20 gigabytes of blockchain just to be able to, feel secure with your coins that you're holding them yourself. And now, just look how easy it is to just buy coins and putting them on your ledger. And you can have many different coins on your ledger. And people are complaining that you can't have all your coins on the ledger. When back in the days, just a few years back, you couldn't even have a single one on a hardware wallet. And just to reply to Sander, yeah, definitely agree that exchanges soon will be able to share liquidity. There are some ICOs coming up where they have aggregated liquidity structures, which to me looks pretty interesting. And when we reach a point where a lot of projects cooperate in that way, we could much faster reach a decentralized level. So good points, and I'm very interested to see how that would evolve. And that's kind of why I like what's it called, the Kyber network. They seem to like to work a lot with different projects, and they have new partnerships basically every second week or whatever.
Yeah,
and seem interesting, decentralized, but seem interesting.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we should talk about, unfortunately, I have 8 minutes left until I have a tutorial, but I really wanted to talk about decentralized exchanges and how you see those working here and what would make those necessary to continue and even grow and thrive more so, because they're so new right now, and getting people to play on these decentralized exchanges is really hard, mainly because, in my opinion, it's all about regulation. And if you cross the SEC or you're doing something that regulators don't like, you're going to get squashed. And I think that that's kind of a hard.
At the end of the day, what can they do? I mean, if you have a truly decentralized exchange, there's nothing the regulators can do. It's up to people how scared they are. But if you have especially if you get a decentralized exchange which could reach a certain level of anonymity, then there's nothing they can do. And that's the biggest fear. And that's why I think a lot of people are scared about it, because there's a lot of things about it in the news and Reddits and here and there that you shouldn't do it, it's going to be bad, this and that. But the main problem that I see right now for decentralized exchange to actually make it is scalability. They can't handle it. The amount of transactions needed to be able to compete with a centralized server is not possible at the moment. You need to be able to run millions of transactions per second. If you get to the point where you can attract high frequency traders, that's when you can actually consider yourself a proper exchange. Until that point, you can't do much. I mean, decentralized exchange will always be a slow exchange compared to others, and others will move towards where liquidity is. And whales and people with high liquidity, they won't go to slow exchanges because they need to run their bots, they need to run the high frequency trading, they need to be able to get out of a trade instantaneously, they need to have the volume there. So fix the scalability issue, amount of transactions, and privacy, the anonymity. If those two things are solved, I don't see why people would use a centralized exchange. And I think that's why a lot of centralized exchanges are trying to move into the decentralized exchanges sector, because they know that once the decentralized exchange come, they're going to be out of business. And you have Bitfinex running the decentralized ETHFinex and EOS Finex that they're planning to launch. You have Binance recently announcing that they're going to move into decentralized exchange structure. So most of them know they won't be able to compete with a decentralized exchange. But right now, a decentralized exchange cannot compete with them due to the scalability issue. But that can be solved pretty soon. I mean, we have Plasma and rating coming up on Ethereum that possibly could reach the amount of transactions per second to millions. And if that happens, then I don't see why people would use a regular exchange compared to a decentralized exchange. You won't have any delistings and shit like that. You won't have any seizure of funds. You won't have any, KYC to enter and shit like that. So if someone that has, how to say, a lot of capital and can feel safe in a exchange environment would prefer anonymous trading rather than being KYC back and forth here and there, no matter how legit they are. It's not about being legit, it's about being left alone, be able to do your things, especially if they want to be a market mover, market manipulator. So to me, decentralized exchanges will be the way to go, but we're not there yet. Not that far away from it, but if you want to invest in something long term, whoa, that was a long text. You don't want to jump in, Buga? We'd love to hear your voice.
Not sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like searching about cash like 2 weeks ago, and I know that they're going to come out with like a roadbook to bring liquidity for, I think, Binance and BitHump, and I think they already get like an agreement or something like that. I'm not sure about that. I don't have any proof, but one of my friends told me about that. So
yeah, I heard that too, actually.
Yeah, and that is really interesting, honestly, because if you have all those exchanges connected to one exchange, then that removes the opportunity to arbitrage, and that brings like liquidity, right, as you were talking about. So I'm really interested in cash.
I mean, whichever manages to solve that is definitely interesting. And there's a good point, San, actually. The whole part about theft and hacks and exposure and stuff like that is, I mean, it's critical for people with a lot of money. You just can't sleep at night if you know that your exchange can be hacked at any second, or you have your identity stolen through exchanges just because, the people behind the exchange are not careful enough or whatever. You never want to, if you can remove the trust issue, the fact that you have to trust someone else, then it's going to be a lot easier to, how to say, scale on a massive level.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have all the centralized servers and stuff. You don't have this problem that all the exchanges had last year where they couldn't accept new people because they simply couldn't handle it.
I guess the only problem is how are we going to turn your fiat currency into a cryptocurrency without a centralized exchange? So I guess these guys are trying to solve that problem too.
I mean, both yes and no. I think once you reach a point where crypto starts to scale on a massive global level, I don't think the authorities will go against it that much because it's going to be too late to stop it anyway. I mean, some have even, more or less said that crypto is too late to stop. They just want to make sure they can tax it. So,
yeah, that's the biggest thing, right? Is governments have done so much work over the last few decades to phase out cash, and then crypto comes along and it's like a new version of cash that's more anonymous. And then they're just like, holy shit, all that work we just put in is going to be undermined by crypto. We want to make sure we spearhead and kind of pave the path the way we want it. And to me, that's what I'm the most worried about, is how do they pave that road and how do they let people continue down that road, and how that unfolds. That's so crucial to the innovation in this space.
Yeah, that's going to be, I agree. That's going to be interesting to see, especially if we get a coin that is actually truly anonymous. That's going to be a very controversial coin.
Yeah, they don't want that. The last thing they want is people to be able to hide their money, because this is essentially the whole thing that people are always, it's like an evolutionary arms race, if you will, except in this case, it's more of a monetary adaptation for the public versus the government, who can hide their funds, avoid taxation. And there's always one who's one step ahead of the other, depending on where we are at the time. For a while, it was gold, and people were hoarding cash under their mattresses. And now this is harder to do.
Gold, actually, because we might see a connection between gold and crypto pop up that we never experienced before. I don't know if you heard about the project Digix DAO.
Mm-hmm.
If they actually manage to launch properly and people get the opportunity to move their crypto into gold, that might be the new, how to say, proxy against crypto rather than fiat. I mean, why would people hold US dollar when they can hold gold instead? When the market is, kind of like now, very volatile and gone down and so forth, why wouldn't you hold gold instead? And that suddenly gives the opportunity for big players to, through crypto, move into gold on an anonymous level. I mean, Digix has already partnered up with this project called Republic Protocol. I don't know exactly where they're traded, but they are their main thing is to provide an anonymous entry and order matching on top of Ethereum. And when they integrate that with Digix, that means basically, short and all, that you would be able to anonymously buy gold, which will be a huge thing if the regulators don't stop it. Because who wouldn't want to have anonymous gold? That hasn't been possible before because you have to go through this institution stuff up until now. But if you can do it through crypto, I could see a lot of big players suddenly enter the crypto field just to be able to get into gold anonymously.
Or, hey, Peyman, if you need a way of buying gold anonymously, give me a call. I can help you out with that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about big players, the ones.
No, I mean, I do that for a lot of people. There's a way of, I mean, doing it anonymously, you're right, that's hard. I mean, if you've got 6 or 7 figures, I can't do that anonymously for you.
That when you have billions of transactions every day, I mean, the amount of, imagine Tether, basically. The volume that Tether has daily right now is about 2-3 billion. You could have that in gold instead. I mean, when gold, if Digix actually manages to do their thing properly, that means people don't really need Tether anymore because they can do the exact same thing, but with Digix instead. So that, to me, and you also see now when you look at the chart how it's basically the only coin that's moving up instead of down in this whole market. And they are about to launch. I think they launched on the main testnet this week or last week or something. And they are about to launch the beta any day now. So it will be interesting what to do. I'm keeping a close eye on those guys to see what they manage to achieve. You asked me earlier what coin is it that I'm looking at the moment. Digix is one of them for sure. And it's the first ICO on Ethereum. That says a lot about them as well. They've managed to survive a lot of ups and downs.
Cool.
And as of today, they still haven't spent a single penny of the ICO raised money. So they still have the whole ICO pot, which was 5 million when they did the ICO, which was 465,000 Ethereum. That was in 2015 or 14, whenever they had the ICO, that was worth $5 million. But right now, I think it's like $500 million or something. Well, Ethereum dropped a bit now, so let's say 200-300 million. So they have, more than 200-300 million to spend that they haven't spent at all up until now. So their budget is pretty good.
Cool.
So once they launch, they actually have the money to do pretty interesting things. How they decide to proceed, I'm not sure. And they actually have done all the work, all the development and everything without touching their money. So they are not stupid. And it was pretty impressive to see that they actually chose to keep everything in Ethereum and not dump it, which most projects did, and to, secure the money in fiat. But they actually believed in the, in this ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, and they kept it in Ethereum. And back then, when they did the ICO, Ethereum was less than $10. So imagine the crazy profits they did for the investors. I mean, at one point, I think they were around, right now, I'm not sure what the price is now, but a few months ago, when nobody was talking about DigX, the price was around $50 or something. And at that point, the money that they had from the ICO was worth more than their market cap. So they could actually liquidate the whole company and pay back all the investors with profit. It was basically the most liquid company on the whole coin market cap list. And still nobody was talking about it.
Right.
And now suddenly we see how suddenly exploded.
Hey, I hate to cut you off, but I got a guy who's chomping at the bit for his tutorial, so I gotta run. Feel free to keep going. Like, anyone jump in. This was great. I loved it. I'd love it if more people jumped in here too. But Peyman,
Yeah, nice to start a thing where everyone can, share their thoughts and everything. So it doesn't have to be themselves. I mean, all of us, it's just at the end of the day, we're trying to share experience and opinions. So
totally. Peyman, thank you so much for doing this. I'd love to do this again whenever you're ready. Maybe.
It's a pretty good day for me.
Good.
Weekday tough, but Sundays or Saturdays.
Yeah, those are good for me too. Maybe we'll try to do this once a weekend on Sundays or something.
Why not?
All right, cool. Well, have a good rest of your night. I'm gonna jump here. Feel free to keep it going, but take it easy, guys. Later.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, Peyman. Thanks, everybody.
If anyone would like to jump in or say something, you can let me know. I can go on for another 10 minutes or so. Then I have to go as well. If not, then we can call it off for today.
So maybe I have one question or one opinion I would like to hear. Oh, so Peyman, what do you think about how fast we will see scalability? Like,
I think we're really close to it. I think we're really, really close to it. People just don't see. I mean, usually people want to see it before they believe it. But you have projects that right now can manage up to. I have seen projects that have proved 400,000 transactions per second. So we are at a level where you can scale on a pretty big level, but people want to see it on Ethereum first. So I think people are waiting for Ethereum to pull it out first. And Plasma, I think it was released on testnet a couple of weeks ago. So they're not that far away from it either. I would guess a couple of months. And then we will start to see surprises. Lightning Network is live now on the mainnet.
Yeah.
So that would, in my opinion, take maybe, say, 2 to 12 weeks until we start seeing some significant movements. And when people start realizing that, oh, I could actually do everything I wanted pretty fine, then, hey, this isn't that bad. Oh, maybe we don't have the issues everyone is talking about.
So it's one thing to have like scalability, right? But if you have scalability and you have like a lot of transactions, those transactions have to be stored somewhere, right? So how do you solve that problem?
Even if you don't want to, okay, let's say you want to move past the further around Lightning Network. So let's ignore Lightning Network completely. Let's go to Rootstock instead, because Rootstock will not have the same structure as Lightning Network, and you can actually store whatever you need to store. And Rootstock, the problem there is that, but it's not being used right now. It doesn't have enough security. It's not robust enough. But that's not true. We actually have, I think last time I checked, it was 30 or 40% of all the miners are testing Rootstock. And that's quite a lot. I mean, I think it's enough with 60% of all the Bitcoin miners to merge mine Rootstock, which doesn't affect them in any way other than it will give them more profit. That would suddenly make Rootstock one of the most robust channels out there. And Rootstock was going to be like a side channel. And on Rootstock, I think right now it's a couple of thousand transactions per second. So that's already quite a lot. And on top of that, you could have all the Ethereum type of apps and smart contracts and all that rest of the jazz.
So Bugra, what do you want to say?
Have you guys ever heard about Komodo and their decentralized platform?
Komodo is a nice project as well. I think they did their first atomic swap between was it Populous and another coin yesterday. So they are starting to move into the atomic swap sector as well, which means that they could pretty much do, I would say, compete with a lot of decentralized exchanges at the same time as they can solve a lot of scalability issues as well. Komodo to me is an interesting project. It's just that, will they be good enough? That's my only concern.
Well, the other problem that I see is, like, if the government gets into the game, how are they going to, you know, tax people who are using these decentralized platforms and who are able to do that, who have internet connection, you know? Like, how is that going to work out? Like, we should not be, I guess, fighting against governments here, because they will exist. Like, I hope they didn't, but
well, that's a difficult question as well, because it becomes a whole. I mean, then it becomes more of a philosophical question. How far do we want to go with crypto? What is the intention of crypto? Do we want to be full anonymous and so forth?
So I think sorry to interrupt you, but I think the tax problem is not that big of an issue. It's because you can, like, tax when someone does work for an employer. It has to be in the books of the employer, right?